Why do the wicked rule, while the righteous weep in silence?
He spoke no word, yet armies fell before him. 70 books, never meant for the masses.
You weren't meant to find this video by accident. But what if these forbidden visions weren't meant for the past? If something inside you stirred while hearing these whispers, like share and subscribe to support Verse and Wisdom. Thank you for being here. May this story bless your spirit and awaken something deep within you. Now, come with me as we open the first sealed scroll and step into the prophecy they never wanted you to find. In the twilight silence of Jerusalem's shattered wall, he sat alone. Ezra, scribe exile, vessel of unanswered questions, looked out over the ruins. His fingers, calloused from copying sacred words, now trembled not from age, but from ache. The ache of a man who had seen too much and understood too little. The temple lay in ruins behind him. Once it had housed the fire of God. Now only cold stones remained darkened by ash and memory. He turned his face upward toward the gray sky streaked with dying light. Why? He whispered, do the wicked rule, while the righteous weep in silence. There was no answer. Only the wind, threading through broken columns like a ghost looking for a place to rest. Ezra rose. He had written scrolls with trembling hands. He had fasted until the edge of vision blurred. He had cried out on behalf of a people who no longer listened to a God who seemed no longer to speak. And then he came, not with thunder, not with fire, but with a stillness that swallowed the air. A figure stepped forward, clothed in light, though no flame burned. Uriel. The name sang in Ezra's bones before it reached his ears. This was no man, no priest, no phantom of his starved mind. This was a messenger, and he spoke. You mourn, Justice, Uriel said, as though it ever lived on earth. Ezra fell to his knees. I do not seek answers for myself, he said, but for those too tired to ask. For widows who bury sons, for children who wake to hunger, for prophets stoned in alleys. Uriel did not blink. There are secrets, the angel said, buried in silence. And there are visions, banned not by heaven but by men. A wind rose, not from the sky but from beneath the earth. Uriel stretched out his hand, and the ground opened. Beneath the broken soil lay a chamber no man had walked for generations. The dust did not rise. It parted as if recognizing something holy had returned. Ezra, with trembling breath, followed Uriel down the stone steps carved not by chisel but by fire. The walls shimmered with forgotten letters, alphabets known only to those who saw beyond sight. One glowed faintly as Ezra passed a single word that had no sound in any tongue but meant remember. At the chamber's heart stood a stone chest sealed by iron bands etched with warnings. Not for the multitude, not for the priesthood, not for kings. Ezra reached forward, but Uriel stopped him. Not yet. He turned. Uriel's gaze pierced centuries. These are the books they buried, he said. 70 scrolls sealed from the world, not because they are false, but because they are true. Ezra's mouth went dry. Then why hide them? Uriel's voice was a whisper now. Because truth does not serve power. And these scrolls, they do not flatter thrones. A silence followed, not empty but thick with presence. Uriel continued. Long ago, men decided which words were worthy of God. They kept the ones that tamed him. They cast out those that burned too bright. Ezra felt it then, the ache of every prophet, every soul who ever asked and was told to hush. The ache of exile. Do you wish to see Uriel asked? Ezra did not answer. He simply knelt. Uriel stepped aside. The chest opened not with noise, but with a breath. Inside scrolls wrapped in linen preserved by silence. Their scent was not of age, but of waiting. Ezra reached for one. A vision gripped him. He stood on the edge of a vast sea. A storm churned the horizon. Out of the waters rose a figure tall, cloaked, shining with silence. And armies gathered to stop him. Ezra watched as the man lifted no sword, spoke no word, yet nations fell like autumn leaves. When the vision faded, Ezra was weeping. "These are not visions of comfort," he said. Uriel nodded. "They are visions of fire." Ezra looked up. "Then why give them to me?" "Because you, Uriel, said still ask." The chamber darkened, not with night, but with knowing. And Ezra understood. When they emerged from the chamber, dawn had broken. Ezra squinted at the light. It was softer than he remembered, or perhaps his eyes had changed. Uriel stood at the threshold, no longer blinding, almost human now. "These visions," Ezra said, "what am I to do with them?" "You are not to shout them," Uriel replied, "but to write, to seal, to wait." Ezra nodded slowly. "For whom?" "For those not yet born, for souls weary of noise, for those who hunger in spirit." Behind them the earth closed. The scrolls hidden once more, this time not by fear but by hope. Ezra picked up his staff. His legs were weak, but his heart was not. Uriel vanished in the light. Alone again, Ezra looked once more at the city. Smoke still rose from broken homes. The people still wept. But in his hands, he held a whisper of fire. And that would be enough. Ezra sat again this time, not in ruin, but in revelation. He held the first of the 70 scrolls. Linen-wrapped edges browned by age, yet the script inside pulsed as if inked that very dawn. He did not open it quickly. No, he listened first. Sometimes the sacred does not shout, it hums. And what it hummed was hunger, not of body, but of soul. He unwrapped the scroll. Its language was older than Hebrew, older than Babylon. Yet he understood not with his mind, but with his marrow. The scroll spoke of a man who dared to question the angels, a man who stood before the fire and did not bow, a man not unlike Ezra. As he read, the chamber around him seemed to breathe. The letters lifted from the page, shimmering in the air, forming not words but visions. He saw a child in chains, lips closed but eyes ablaze. He saw temples built high, not for worship, but for control. He saw scribes, men like himself, bearing scrolls in clay tears, staining every line. Then came a voice. It was not Uriel. It was the scroll. In the days to come, it said, truth will be tailored to fit the tongues of kings. They will quote heaven but serve earth. They will call doubt a sin and obedience a virtue. Ezra wept again. Not from sorrow, but from recognition. He had seen it begin. Now he saw where it led. The scroll shifted in his hands, and a new vision unfurled before his eyes. A figure cloaked in black stood in a city of glass and smoke. The people bowed not from reverence, but from exhaustion. Above them, altars of silver gleamed not to God, but to gold. Ezra cried out, "Is this Babylon?" The scroll answered, "No. It is what comes after." He saw priests in velvet robes weighing scripture on scales of profit. He saw miracles sold for coin, repentance exchanged for influence. But he also saw hidden in alleys under cracked roofs, men and women praying in silence, without books, without choirs, but with fire in their eyes. These, the scroll said, are the ones who remember. And then he saw her, an old woman bent with age, hands gnarled like olive roots. She sat in a crumbling house, her only light a clay lamp. She was breathing, not just air, but spirit. Each breath she exhaled made the lamp glow brighter. Ezra watched as her breath, wordless and holy, traveled far beyond her walls, lighting other lamps, in other homes, in other lands. The scroll whispered, "She is part of the church that cannot be built." Ezra shivered. It was then he noticed something. Each scroll was not merely a text, it was a living mirror. And in every vision he saw a piece of himself. The fears he had buried, the questions he dared not ask, the faith that flickered beneath his robes. The scroll trembled in his hands. not from weight, but from urgency. And again it spoke. There will come a time, it said, when men will ban books, not because they lie, but because they pierce. Ezra gripped it tighter. When he asked, when silence becomes more dangerous than heresy. The word scorched him. He wanted to stop, to seal the scrolls and flee their fire, but he could not. He had seen too much, and something within him, something ancient, sacred, and defiant, had awakened. He stood, and the vision vanished. The scroll lay still, quiet once more. But Ezra was not. He stepped out from the chamber. The air bit his skin, but his eyes no longer blinked in fear. Uriel was waiting. "You have seen," the angel said. Ezra nodded. "And I have wept." Uriel's gaze softened, as if the morning pleased him. "You are not alone in your hunger," he said. "There are others hidden, scattered, burning in silence." Ezra looked toward the horizon. He no longer saw only ruins. He saw seeds. "I must write," he said. "Not to preach, not to lead, but to leave a trail." Uriel smiled faintly. "Write not for kings. Write for those the world forgets." Ezra descended from the mountain scrolls pressed against his chest like coals. The streets below did not cheer. No one noticed the fire he carried. But centuries later, someone would. And that would be enough. That night, as he sat to write, Ezra did not begin with doctrine. He began with ache. He wrote of widows who remembered the sound of laughter, of children who learned to pray with broken bread, of prophets who spoke only once and were stoned for their silence. He wrote not to teach, but to testify. And with every line the ink glowed, faintly, not with magic, but with memory. Far away in a time not yet born, a soul would one day open this scroll. They would read, and something inside them would say, "I am not alone." Ezra did not know their name, but he wrote for them, and in that he became more than a scribe. He became a voice buried in time, waiting to be heard. They gathered at night. Not in temples, not in synagogues, but in hidden places, cracked basements, ruined vineyards, abandoned watchtowers. Men, women, children, not many, just enough to keep the flame alive. Ezra watched from a distance. The fire had moved on from him. He had become the first voice, but not the only one. Now there were others. An old fisherman who hummed psalms while mending nets. A young girl who saw visions when she touched stone. A widow who taught her grandson to pray with silence. They never spoke of the scrolls, not directly, but somehow they knew. In their dreams, in their hunger, in their questions, and always when they gathered, they breathed. It was not ritual. It was not doctrine. It was memory. "Breath into dust," they would say, "and light shall find you." Ezra had written those words. He did not remember doing so, but they had found them, and they had made them sacred. One night he approached. The circle of people sat around a modest fire. No scrolls, no priests, no incense, only warmth and breath and watchful eyes. They welcomed him, though they did not ask his name. He sat in silence. He listened. A boy of 10 spoke. "When I was sick," he said, "I heard a voice. It didn't heal me, but it stayed." An old woman nodded. "That is healing enough." Ezra wept quietly. This was no sect, no cult, no rebellion. This was the ache, remembering its shape. Later that night, a storm broke across the hills. The fire was doused, but no one moved. They simply breathed together until the wind passed. And Ezra knew this was the church that could not be built. Not of stone, not of law, not of bloodlines, but of longing. The next morning he left quietly. He had no gospel to proclaim, only stories, and he would write them all. His scrolls began to change. He no longer recorded visions. He recorded fragments. A conversation in a vineyard under moonlight. A dream where a lion spoke in riddles. A prayer whispered in the ruins of Jericho. He wrote them without commentary, without control. They were not teachings, they were traces. And still the visions came. One night, Ezra saw a man in chains. Not iron chains, but chains of light, soft, beautiful, and binding. The man smiled even as he bled. Behind him stood a city of gold. Ezra cried, "Why does he not flee?" And the vision answered, "Because some prisons are built from praise." Another night, he saw a woman with wings, one broken one, burning. She wept over a grave. On the tombstone was written, "Certainty." Ezra awoke trembling. He knew what he had to do. He must hide the scrolls again, not to protect them from fire, but from misuse. The words were too alive. They had breath, and breath in the wrong hands becomes poison. So he traveled, from village to village, ruin to ruin, carrying no banner, offering no miracles. Only paper, only ink, only fire. He found caves, wells, broken altars, abandoned tombs. In each he left a scroll. Not all 70, only the ones that ached the most. And each scroll, before it was hidden, he kissed not with lips, but with breath. So it would remember him. Decades passed. Ezra grew older. His beard grayed, his hands stiffened, but the visions did not stop. They grew quieter. They no longer burned. They whispered. On his final night, he sat alone under a fig tree. He did not fear death. He feared forgetting. So he whispered one last prayer, not to God, but to the future, to the one who finds these words. "You are not the end. You are the answer." And with that, he closed his eyes. The wind lifted, and somewhere far away, a sealed scroll began to breathe. It would take generations before another hand found that breath. But it did. A boy, nameless and poor, seeking shelter from the sun, stumbled upon a crack in the rocks. Curious, he reached inside. His fingers met linen, and linen met destiny. The scroll he pulled was not heavy, yet as he opened it, the wind shifted, and his eyes widened. He did not read the language, but his spirit did. He carried the scroll to his grandmother, who burned incense but trusted silence more. She did not speak for a long time. Then finally she smiled. "Someone remembered us," she said. And in that moment, Ezra's last breath reached home. So began the second awakening. Not of churches, not of power, but of hunger, of breath, of fire wrapped in linen. The words had waited long enough. They whispered of it in silence. Not the first scroll, not the last, but the 13th. The forbidden one. Some said Ezra never saw it. Others claimed it was not written, but breathed. A scroll made of wind, only visible to those who had lost everything. They called it the voice that wasn't written. Ezra heard of it in dreams. Not the gentle kind, but the ones that come just before waking, where fire meets breath and the soul forgets its name. In one such dream he saw a feather, torn, still trembling. It hovered above a scorched hill where no trees grew and no voices sang. And then, a sound, not music, not words, but defiance. A cry too sacred for scripture. It came from a figure cloaked in fractured light, one wing whole, the other bleeding. His eyes held dawn and dusk at once. Ezra knew this was not a man, not even a messenger. This was a warning. The figure spoke not aloud, but into Ezra's bones. "I was once flame," it said. "I carried the names of stars, but I saw what the thrones did not want seen. I saw priests paint power onto God's face. I warned them." A pause. "And for this, I was cast out." Ezra saw the angel fall, not with terror, but with sorrow, as if heaven had exiled a question. "I am the 13th scroll," the voice continued. "Not written on parchment, but on memory. I am what they burned, what they feared. And still, I remain." Ezra tried to speak, but no sound came, only tears. The vision shifted. The angel now knelt by a cradle. A child slept inside. The winged figure leaned close and whispered a name into the child's ear. Ezra could not hear it, but the stars dimmed when it was spoken. Then the angel turned. "Tell them," he said, "that not all light is loyal. Then he vanished, and Ezra woke heart-pounding, breath-shallow fingers clutching for ink. He tried to write what he had seen, but the words fought him. The ink bled strangely, forming symbols he did not recognize. His hand trembled, his quill cracked. Still he pressed on. The lines were jagged, unfinished phrases with no grammar thoughts, without tether. Light torn by praise. A wing that sang in exile. Not silence, not speech, but warning. He wrote until his breath grew shallow, his lips dry. The candle flickered. And still, the scroll would not take shape. Ezra whispered, "How do I write a voice that was not allowed to speak?" No answer came, only wind, curling through the stones like a sigh. He tried again. One line, a final attempt. Some angels fall, not for pride, but for telling the truth too early. He dropped the quill, the parchment stained with sweat. He had written something, but he did not know what. Then his chest tightened. A sharpness seized his ribs. Ezra fell forward, breath caught between two words, and he did not rise. They found him at dawn, his body folded over the parchment, his eyes wide, as if he had glimpsed something no coffin could hold. The scroll was never finished. The line stopped midway, ink trailing off into white space. They buried him with no hymns, no titles, just silence. But someone kept the parchment. They did not try to complete it. They simply wrapped it in linen and breathed upon it. That breath carried far, through centuries, through whispers, through dust. One day a nameless monk in a distant land found the line. He copied it not with reverence but with ache. And beneath it he wrote a question. What if the 13th scroll was not lost, but still speaking? Somewhere far beneath stone and flame a feather trembled. It was not whole, but it remembered flight. And that was enough. She wasn't a prophet. She wasn't a nun. She was a scribe, but one no one trained. They found her outside the monastery walls, curled between root and ruin. She couldn't remember where she'd been born, only that her fingers knew how to shape letters before her lips knew how to speak. The elders let her stay, not from charity, but awe, because when she wrote the ink didn't fade. It deepened, as if drawn from something underneath. The texts she copied glowed at dusk, not visibly, but those who read them wept, not from sadness, from nearness. She wrote without pause, without food, without ink. Pages turned, quills wore thin, and yet no one could find the source of her markings. No well, no bottle, only breath. It was said that when she exhaled, the parchment grew darker, that her lungs contained language, that her silence held syllables too sacred for tongues. One night a scholar tried to transcribe what she wrote. He failed. The letters shifted, not to hide, to protect, because her lines weren't meant for copying, only for becoming. One winter evening she vanished. No footsteps, no farewell, just an empty chair and a final page, blank, but when held to the heart, it beat. No pulse, just presence. Years later, children born to that convent wrote poems. None knew why, none were taught, but their rhymes matched her cadences. And when they sang, the walls hummed. A convent with no choir became a cathedral of breath. And the oldest nun, once young when the girl had come, whispered. She didn't leave. She became the ink. And in times of doubt, they held that final page and listened and heard nothing except everything Rome had spoken. And what Rome spoke echoed like thunder across the parchments of the faithful. In the year 397 at the Council of Carthage, men in robes debated the breath of God. Which words should live? Which should be buried? Not because they were false, but because they were inconvenient. One scroll was too wild, another too tender, another too fierce. So they sealed them. Some were burned, others simply vanished. But a few survived, in corners, in whispers, in trembling hands. In one village, a woman copied texts at night. She had no name, only ink-stained fingers and a heartbeat that pulsed with fear and fire. She knew the decree, knew the cost. Still, she copied. One manuscript bore no title, but on the edge of the page in fading ink, she wrote, "Truth without breath becomes law. Law without ache becomes a cage." It was not a verse, it was a wound, and the wound remained open. Years later, in the scriptorium of a basilica, a priest sorting old vellum found the manuscript. He read the note. He did not flinch. But that night he dreamed. He saw a cage made of scripture. He saw men choking on gold. He saw a church with no roof because the sky had fled. He woke weeping. The next day he placed the manuscript in his robe and never spoke of it again. But he read it, and with each word the breath returned. And each time he preached, his voice trembled not with doubt, but with ache. For the truth was no longer bound. It had found a crack in the cage, and the breath was moving. And in the villages, people noticed, his sermons no longer sounded like edicts. They sounded like longing. Not doctrine, but desire. Not commands, but confession. And some wept, not because they understood, but because something old inside them had stirred. The woman who wrote had vanished. No grave, no name, no memory, except the words she bled onto the page. Words that passed through fire. Words that traveled in silence. Words that reawakened a priest's voice, and through him a congregation. And though the council never knew her name, the breath did. The breath never forgot. Some say the manuscript was lost again, buried in a vault beneath a monastery that no longer breathes. Others say it turned to ash in a war no one remembers. But a few say it survived. They say the priest before his death copied the words by memory onto the inside of his door. They say every morning before preaching he would place his palm there and breathe. A reminder that breath precedes word, that ache precedes truth, and that cages, even golden ones, are not God. And today when someone whispers that line, truth without breath becomes law. Law without ache becomes a cage. It echoes, not as rebellion, but as reverence, as remembrance, as prophecy. And what of the other scrolls? The ones too holy to be spoken aloud. Some say they were buried beneath altars. Others hidden in plain sight, disguised in psalm, clothed in metaphor. But a few wandered, carried by those who heard too much. A child in Antioch once claimed he saw a lion of fire breathing scripture across the sky. They called him mad. He was 12 and blind, but when he spoke, elders wept. He described symbols no one taught him. He recited verses that had no book. And then one day he vanished, left behind a single phrase scrawled on a clay tablet. The heavens have mouths, and they are hungry. That phrase found its way to a scholar in Alexandria. He studied stars, but after reading the phrase, he never looked up again. He looked in. He stopped writing charts. He began carving prayers, in stone, in bread, in silence. He whispered to his students, "The stars are not maps. They are memories." One of his students fled. He could not bear the silence. He took the phrase and turned it into a song, sang it in marketplaces, in prisons, to children with no name. And the song grew, but not in volume, in weight. Every time it was sung, something unseen bent low. And one night in a village drowning in drought, the song was heard, and the sky wept. The elders did not understand, but they fell to their knees, because the rain did not fall like water. It fell like memory. Each drop was a word, and each word true. And though the people forgot the lyrics, they remembered the ache, and in the ache they heard the voice of the one who speaks without sound. They built no temple. They carved no idol. They just sang, quietly, with closed eyes, as if the sound itself could rebuild what the scrolls had hidden, as if truth once breathed never truly dies. And one child, barely old enough to walk, looked at the sky and whispered, "Is that God crying?" The mother did not answer, but held him closer, and in that holding, a new scroll was written, not in ink, not on paper, but in flesh, in memory, in longing. She was born without a voice, not mute from pain, not stricken by wound, just voiceless. The sisters called her the Quiet, but not with cruelty, with caution, because though she did not speak, something in her silence spoke. She lived in the far edge of the convent where the sun touched only half the wall and the wind came not from air but from memory. Each night when the others slept, she knelt in the garden and wrote, with bare fingers into the soil. No ink, no quill, just touch. The words she shaped had no form, no language, but the earth remembered. And when the moonlight struck just right, the ground glowed faintly where her hands had passed. One night, a young nun woke in tears. She had dreamed a flame burning in the garden, not consuming, illuminating. She ran to the soil and saw nothing, but as she wept, a phrase formed in her mouth, a line of verse she had never learned. When dust remembers light, even ashes sing. She collapsed sobbing. The next day, without knowing why, she whispered the line to another, and that one also wept. By week's end, the entire convent knew it. No one had written it. No one had taught it. But all had heard it, not in their ears, but in their ache. The elder abbess called a meeting. She asked who spoke the line first. The Quiet did not raise her hand, but her eyes did. They burned, not with pride, but with remembering. And the ground outside shivered. Someone walked to the garden at dusk and knelt. And though there were no letters, they felt the verse. They felt it under their knees, in their breath, in the trembling of the violets. From that day, the Quiet was never asked to speak. They understood. Her language had no tongue. Her scriptures had no ink. Her gospel was in the loam. And when pilgrims came to the convent seeking relics or relic keepers, they were brought to the garden, not to touch, but to kneel. They said nothing, only breathed. And some heard something, not words, but warmth, a vibration in the ribs, a flicker beneath the breastbone. And sometimes when rain came, it did not fall straight. It curled, as if it were dancing toward the poems still etched in the mud. Poems no eye could read, but every soul recognized. And somewhere between the roots and the silence, a voice bloomed, not hers, not theirs, but ours. He was old, not just in bones, in breath. Each exhale carried a memory no longer named. He had served, sung, transcribed. He had watched towers rise, watched them fall, but nothing lingered. Until one day, a traveler knocked, not asking for bread, just warmth. And as he sat, the traveler whispered, "When dust remembers light, even ashes sing." The old monk froze. His cup trembled. That line, he knew it. He had not read it. He had not written it. But once, long ago, in a dream beneath falling leaves, he had heard it. He asked the traveler where she heard it. She didn't know. She had simply known it. And suddenly, he could not stay. He followed something unseen, an echo that wasn't sound, a hum beneath his lungs. It led him to the hills, to a cave no map showed. Inside only ash and stones, arranged not in symbols, but rhythm. He knelt and breathed, and the breath shaped itself, not into words, into return. He did not copy. He did not chant. He simply sat and whispered, "Breath is older than meaning." He vanished after that. No one found his body. No one found the cave. But in distant cities, strangers began repeating the line. They didn't know its origin. They only felt invited. Breath is older than meaning. Some carved it in wood. Some sang it in sleep. And some, when repeating it, dreamed of a man sitting in silence, smiling. Not as teacher, not as prophet, just present. And the present spoke of something no scroll could carry. Of breath before language. Of silence that sings. Of the voice behind all voices. And that, perhaps, was the first prophecy, and the last. He had once worn velvet, slept beneath chandeliers, dined beside kings, but now he walked barefoot, with one possession, a scroll. No title, no ink, just folds worn soft by touch. No one knew why he carried it. No one could read it, because when unrolled there were no words, only silence. And yet those who stood near said they felt something, a ripple, a hush, and then memory. Not remembered, but revealed. One woman said she saw her mother's voice. A child said he saw his first fear and forgave it. A soldier collapsed, whispering the name of someone he buried. Wherever the scroll opened, something opened within. Not imagination, but exposure. As if the scroll didn't tell. It remembered, and remembering, healed or haunted. One day he stood in the town square. Crowds gathered, some with mockery, some with hope. He unrolled the scroll, still blank, but suddenly tears. Every face, from beggar to magistrate. Some covered their eyes, others fell to knees. Not one word had been spoken, but the silence roared. A child laughed. A prisoner wept. A rich man removed his rings. Each saw something different. Each saw themselves, not as they appeared, but as they were unwritten. And then, written. And the man, once noble, once forgotten, closed the scroll and said the only words he had spoken in years. You were always written. And then he vanished. Some say he became wind. Some say he entered the scroll. But most say he had never truly been there. Only the message had. Only the mirror. And still today, when someone faces the part of them no one sees, they whisper, I was always written. Ooh. After his disappearance, the scrolls began appearing. Blank. Unmarked. Dozens of them. Left on doorsteps. In wells, beneath pillows. Some believed they were forgeries. Some believed they were sacred. But all were silent. When one was thrown into fire, it did not burn. The flame bent around it. When another was buried, white flowers bloomed above. No seeds, no rain, only memory. A child placed one scroll on the chest of his dying father. The man opened his eyes, smiled. I see it now, he whispered, and passed peacefully. No struggle, no fear, just recognition. Soon the phrase began to appear. On walls, in chalk, in ash, in breath. You were always written. No one claimed authorship. No one needed to. Because those who read it, felt it. Not like belief, like remembering. And in a field with no name, a tree blossomed. In winter, white petals, soft wind. And inside one flower, etched by no hand, was a final line. You are still being written. And the tree breathed. The prison was old, stone, damp, forgotten, but not silent. They called it the cage of tongues, a place for those who spoke in ways that frightened kings. Not with curses, with visions. They did not scream. They whispered. And what they whispered returned. On the walls, drawn in blood. Lines, loops, spirals. Not letters, not quite. But anyone who looked cried. Not in fear, in familiarity. One jailer, hardened by years of silence, touched a line and lost his voice. No illness, no pain, just gone. But that night he dreamed. He heard music, not around him, within, and the song was his voice. But speaking a language he had never learned. He woke weeping. He began to change. He brought bread to the prisoners. He listened with his chest. He sat by the walls not to guard, but to remember. And the visions deepened. One night, a prisoner wrote a final line in crimson across the stone. To silence belongs the first song. The jailer stood before it. He closed his eyes and heard everything. Then, without word or warning, he opened every cell and walked away. No one followed. Not out of fear, but awe. Because the moment he stepped into the morning light, he vanished. But the walls kept singing. Even now the dungeon is empty. But those who enter still cry. Not because of what they see, but because something unseen sees them. Said. After the jailer vanished, monks were sent to investigate. They expected blasphemy. They expected madness. But what they found was light. No blood on the walls. No symbols. Only a glow. Soft. Shifting. As if the stones remembered light. One monk leaned close, pressed his ear to the stone, and gasped. Not from sound, from breath. The wall was breathing. Another held a candle. As its flame wavered, a faint line emerged across the stone. He who listens beyond the breath becomes the breath. No one spoke. No one wrote it down. But all remembered. The monks left the prison. And in the years that followed, anyone who had ever stood inside began to dream. They saw the jailer, not speaking, just watching. But his gaze was not judgment. It was mercy. And each person who woke from those dreams woke with peace. The kind that doesn't explain, only restores. Beneath the monastery, deeper than cellars, lower than bones, was a door. No lock, no guard, only dust. And beyond it, books. Books no one catalogued. Books no one claimed. And always, the sound of turning pages. Even when no one moved. Even when no wind stirred. One student, young and restless, crept through the door. He found silence. And breath. And a single book with no title. No author. Just weight. As if it had been read by centuries. He opened it. No words. Only stillness. And then, image. But not on the page. In his mind. He saw himself, but not as he was. As he had been. As he might be. A blind man singing to graves. A boy weeping beside a river no one remembered. A corpse cradled by strangers, smiling. Each page revealed a different hymn. Not past, not future. Essence. He flipped faster. Each image pierced deeper, until he could not breathe. He closed the book, and the pain began. In his chest, in his ribs. Like mourning something never held. He tried to leave, but the air clung to him, and the pages turned without hands. He fled, but for years after, he dreamed of the book, and in every dream, he was a different reader, and each time he woke, he wept. Not from fear, from recognition. Years passed. The boy became a man, a teacher, but he taught without books. He told stories, and every listener heard a different one. One woman heard forgiveness. One man heard warning. One child heard home, all from the same tale. When asked how he only smiled, "I don't tell," he said. "I only open the book without touching it." Some laughed. Some believed. All wept. And when he died, there were no sermons, no relics, only wind, turning pages unseen. And somewhere in the world, no one knew where someone heard paper turning. Not by hand, by memory, by ache. Years later, one of his students found the old monastery. Found the door. Still open, still quiet. And inside, the book. Still blank, but breathing. He did not read. He only knelt and whispered, "Let me remember what I never knew." The pages turned, and the silence wept. She had no name, only a scarf. Frayed, stitched, worn by time. It bore a symbol no one recognized. Not a crest, not a rune, just memory. They found her as an infant on the steps of the convent. She grew up with the bells, with silence. She never asked about her parents. Not because she wasn't curious, but because she felt watched. Not by eyes, by breath. Every time she prayed, something answered. Not with words, with warmth, like a hand brushing the soul. She never told the others. Some things too sacred cannot be explained, only endured. One evening, as the dusk bled into stone, she knelt at the chapel wall. Her hand touched cold marble, and the symbol from her scarf appeared. Not carved, not painted, light, pure, pulsing, and the wall cracked, silently. No quake, no sound, just opening. Behind it, a room. No one had seen it. No record named it. It should not have been, but it was. Inside light, not shining from candles, from the walls themselves, and etched into stone across an altar of air. You were never forgotten. Her knees gave way. Her breath stilled. She did not cry. She remembered. And in remembering, she returned. Not to a place, to a knowing that she had never been left, only led. She had no name, only a scarf, frayed, stitched, worn by time. It bore a symbol no one recognized. Not a crest, not a rune, just memory. They found her as an infant on the steps of the convent. She grew up with the bells, with silence. She never asked about her parents, not because she wasn't curious, but because she felt watched. Not by eyes, by breath. Every time she prayed, something answered. Not with words, with warmth, like a hand brushing the soul. She never told the others. Some things too sacred cannot be explained, only endured. One evening, as the dusk bled into stone, she knelt at the chapel wall. Her hand touched cold marble, and the symbol from her scarf appeared. Not carved, not painted, light, pure, pulsing, and the wall cracked, silently. No quake, no sound, just opening. Behind it, a room. No one had seen it. No record named it. It should not have been, but it was. Inside light, not shining from candles, from the walls themselves, and etched into stone across an altar of air. You were never forgotten. Her knees gave way. Her breath stilled. She did not cry. She remembered, and in remembering, she returned. Not to a place, to a knowing that she had never been left, only led. She told no one, not the abbess, not the sisters, not even the night. But something in her changed. When she prayed, others wept, not from sorrow, but recognition, a resonance they could not name. Soon the convent began to shift, not in rules, in rhythm. People paused before speaking, listened longer, whispered hymns as if afraid to wake the walls. The girls still wore the scarf, still bore the silence, but now she glowed. One night before dawn she vanished. No footprints, no sound, only the scarf, placed gently on the altar, and stitched upon it now in silver thread were words no one had woven. The ones who breathe with me will never be lost. The cloth held warmth, as if someone had just lifted their hand, and in that warmth the chapel breathed. They called him a heretic, a madman, a priest of smoke and shadows. But he called himself a listener. His chamber smelled of iron dust and longing. Scrolls lined the walls, some blank, some burned, all sacred. He was searching, not for gold, not for elixirs, for the first language, the word before all words, the breath before breath. He believed such a word existed, not written by hand, not spoken by voice, only remembered by silence. He etched symbols on copper, whispered names into fire, pressed ash into stone. Each attempt failed, until one night under a moonless sky he burned them all, not in rage, in surrender. And in the mound of glowing soot one mark remained, simple, unfamiliar, alive. It flickered, not like flame, like breath. He stared and wept, not from discovery, from recognition. He copied the mark, once, onto the chest of a clay figure, one he had sculpted in solitude without eyes. He waited, nothing, until a breath stirred the dust. Not his. The statue moved. Its eyelids did not open, but they shifted, as if trying. He backed away, not in fear, in reverence. He hadn't created life. He had heard it. And the mark was not his. It had always been there, hidden beneath ink, waiting to be burned free. He whispered to the statue, "What is your name?" No answer, only silence. But in that silence, a pulse. His own, no. It's. He sat with it for hours, not speaking, only listening. And the clay listened back. That night in dreams he saw the mark again, but larger, spanning sky, woven into rivers, drawn into the wrinkles of an old woman's hand. It wasn't a word. It was a remembering. He woke with the wind pressing against the walls, whispering the same sound. Soft. So soft he had to stop breathing just to hear it. Breathe. That was the word. Not command. Not knowledge. Invitation. He rushed back to the chamber. The statue was gone. Only the mark remained, burned into the floor. Still warm. He knelt, traced it with his finger. And for the first time in decades, he inhaled without thinking. Not to live, to be lived. From that moment, he never etched again. Never burned. He taught no one. But everyone who sat with him changed. Not from answers, from stillness. He said nothing. But when he died, the wind carried one word through the valley. Breathe. And every leaf replied. Years passed. The chamber fell into ruin. The city above forgot his name, forgot his dwelling. But travelers lost or weary sometimes found the door. And when they did, they paused. Not because of signs. There were none. Not because of relics. There was only dust. But because the air listened. And when they stepped inside, they forgot their burdens, their names, their wounds. And in the center, where the mark had once burned, was nothing. No symbol, no stone, only breath. The space pulsed, quiet, holy. Some said they felt arms around them, others voices. None agreed. All wept. And when they returned to the world, they no longer feared endings, because they had heard the beginning. The word was not power. It was presence, not magic. Memory, not control. Communion, and in secret in fields and temples, on mountain trails and in cradles, the mark began appearing again, drawn by no one, understood by few, but always near those who had forgotten how to hope. And each time it was found, it did not teach, it breathed. A child once traced it into sand, and the tide washed it away. But that night, the wind sang to her in her sleep, and the song needed no melody, just pause and breath. An old woman in a desert village once woke with a mark etched into her palm. She had never seen it before, but she didn't scream. She smiled and began gathering stones. By evening, she had built a circle, nothing special, but the wind refused to pass through it, as if honoring a center it remembered. She sat, closed her eyes, and whispered the word, breathe. And in the distance, the crops began to rise, not because of miracle, but memory. The soil remembered how to receive. A prisoner held for decades in silence carved the mark into his cell, not with tools, with breath on glass. And that night the guards heard a voice singing, not from the cell, from the stone, and the melody was their childhood. One by one they knelt outside his door, not to release him, to return to something they forgot they once believed. Not a religion, not a law, just a word, the word, not shouted, not explained, only breathed. And in its breath, the beginning never ended. He was not a monk, not a scholar, not a believer. He was a guardian of what he did not ask. In the deepest vault beneath the monastery, beyond 3 iron doors and a staircase carved in circles, he kept the texts, thousands, wrapped in cloth, sealed in wax, none labeled. He was given one command, do not read, and for 39 years he obeyed. He stacked, he dusted, he waited, and never once questioned why. Until the night one scroll fell. It didn't slip, it dropped, from a shelf that hadn't been touched in decades. He picked it up. The seal had cracked. A single thread dangled. The parchment unrolled itself. And at the top in ink, too dark to shine, were the words, "To read this is to become this." He froze. He should have closed it. But his eyes refused. The first line burned, not with fire, with familiarity. He kept reading. And as he did, his skin changed. Pigment shifted. Veins pulsed differently. Not pain. Not sickness. Script. Letters, lines, symbols began forming beneath his skin. The letters weren't on him. They were in him. The more he read, the more he felt pages turning inside his chest. He tried to stop. He couldn't. The scroll read him back. Every wound, every silence, every forgotten prayer he never said. It knew, and still it continued. His breath slowed, not from fear, from remembering. By the time he reached the end, he no longer stood. He knelt, not in submission, in becoming. And when the final word was spoken, not aloud but within, he vanished. No smoke, no wind, just absence. Where he had stood was the scroll, closed, uncreased, but new ink had appeared. In the margin, name Elior, his name, written where no one had written. A week later, the monastery sent a new guardian. Young, curious, he was warned. He was told the rules. Do not read. He nodded and obeyed. For a while, until he noticed something strange. One scroll shifted, slightly, each day a fraction closer to the edge. Then a word appeared on the outside. His name. He hadn't written it, but it was there. And beside it in red, do not read the margin. He laughed. A joke, perhaps. But the next morning the scroll lay open. Not fully. Just enough. And the name in the margin had moved. From the side, toward the center. By dusk it was nearly touching the text. He placed it back, weighted it down, locked the vault. But when he returned, the name was centered, and underneath it, he who reads becomes. He panicked, tried to burn the scroll. It would not burn. Tried to bury it. It returned. Finally, he sealed it in stone. But at night, he dreamed of margins, of hands made of letters, of skin becoming vellum, and always, always, a voice whispering, do not read the margin. But he already had. And in the morning, his name appeared on another scroll, unwritten, but waiting. Years passed. The scroll remained sealed. The new guardian aged, but he never left. He no longer spoke, only listened, to margins, to whispers between lines. He began writing, not on paper, on air, with fingers, gestures no one taught him, movements older than language. Children who passed the vault felt chills, not of cold, of presence. And always when they drew pictures in dust curves appeared. Shapes they could not name, margins, The abbess grew concerned, sent priests. They read nothing, but returned changed. Their sermons slowed. Their prayers wept. One day the guardian disappeared. No door opened, no exit found, but on the floor of the vault, a scroll, closed, and beside it, "Do not read the margin." But no one did. Not anymore, because somehow they already had. And the words were waiting, not to be read, to be remembered, in skin, in silence. In the spaces between, he was born without words. No cry, no cooing, only breath. The villagers called him hollow, but his mother disagreed. "He listens," she said, "just not to us." By age 5, he spent hours in the chapel, not praying, listening. He'd sit near the old scrolls stacked in silence, and tilt his head, as if hearing something behind the parchment. When asked what he heard, he pointed to the sky, then to his chest, then drew in air, shapes no one had taught him, symbols that flickered like dust in sunlight. The elders watched. Some feared, but a few remembered. Stories of word-bearers, those who did not speak but awakened sound. Still no one could explain what the boy was. He did not learn letters. He traced winds. He followed shadows. And when the village grew too loud, he walked away. North, alone, following whispers no one else could hear. He came to a town where no one sang, not from sadness, from forgetting. They had lost their music. Their language had splintered into grunts. But when the boy entered the square, he knelt, drew in the dust, a single curve, and the air changed. A tone low ancient rose from the ground. People stopped, turned, listened, and wept. The boy moved his hands again, another symbol, and the silence responded. It did not break. It harmonized. From then on, he was called the scribe of the air. He carried no parchment, no brush, no ink, only listening. He journeyed from place to place, never asked for food, never slept in homes. He sat where silence grew heavy and stirred it, not with noise, with memory. One village built a stone for him, not a statue, a flat slab. On it no name, only a spiral, drawn in gold dust. Each year wind would wipe it clean, and each year someone somewhere redrew it. Even children, especially children. They said he still passed by. When the night was too still, when someone forgot how to pray. A girl once saw him in the market, flickering between curtains. He raised no hand, spoke no word, but she began humming afterward. A song no one taught her, a tune older than fear. He was seen again during a storm. A fisherman stranded on the rocks heard a melody above the waves. It steadied him. He lived. He wept. Years passed. Stories faded. But in the oldest towns, when a person sits in silence too long, they don't say they're lost. They say, he is near. And sometimes if the silence is honest, a sound begins. No notes, no lyrics, only truth, not spoken, not sung, written, in air. In a mountain monastery, a bell once rang with no hand upon it. Monks searched for wind. There was none, only a faint hum in the chapel. When they listened closely, they heard their own names, not shouted, whispered, by memory, by mercy. One monk blind from birth saw visions in the ringing. He painted with his fingers. No pigment, only air. And pilgrims traveled for days just to sit with him, not to be healed, to remember. Not who they were, but what they were before words. And always in the background, a faint breath-like tone, as if someone was still drawing between the atoms. They say when a child is born and does not cry, wait. If the wind enters the room, and the windows tremble softly, do not be afraid. He is not silent. He is writing. And what comes next? is not a sound, but a becoming. She lived alone, old, quiet, caretaker of a forgotten library. No visitors came, no letters arrived, but still she dusted the shelves. Each morning, each aisle, even those whose books had never been opened. She believed silence was sacred, that pages could hear, and that one day the books might speak back. Most thought her mad. Even she wasn't sure. Until the morning she found it. No title, no number, no author. Just a book perfectly square sitting where no book had ever been. She reached for it. It felt warm, as if recently touched. She opened it. Nothing. Blank. Every page. She smiled. "Perhaps it's listening," she whispered, and left it on the desk. That night she dreamed of her childhood garden, of lilies, of thunder, of her mother's voice calling her back inside. She woke with tears, and when she entered the library, the book was open. One line glowed on the page. Lilies bent beneath the storm but still reached for morning. Her dream. Written. Exactly. She laughed, then cried, then whispered, "Thank you." The book remained open. The next night she dreamed again, of snow that never touched the ground, of birds frozen mid-flight, of a doorway that led to music. And in the morning, a second line. Winter waits for no one, but music lingers in its shadow. So it continued. Each night she dreamed. Each morning the book remembered. No one else saw it. Even when the bishop visited, the book refused to open. It opened only for her, only when she dreamed. Sometimes joyful, sometimes terrifying. Once she dreamed she became the wind, another time ashes. But the book never judged, only recorded. A mirror made of paper. One day she dreamed nothing, and the book remained closed. She sat beside it, apologized, waited, and that night dreams returned. So did the pages. She began speaking to the book, not to read, to reflect. "I dreamed of a child," she said once, "but I don't remember if it was mine." The next day a page appeared. Some children are not born from bodies, but from silence. She smiled for hours. Villagers whispered of her glow, how her eyes seemed clearer, how her step grew lighter. Years passed. She aged further. Hair silver, back bent. But her dreams never stopped. Until one night, she dreamed of her own death. Not frightening, peaceful. She sat beneath a willow tree, fell asleep in sunlight. A hand closed hers. No face, only warmth. And a voice familiar. "Well done." She woke before dawn. No tears, no fear. She dressed, lit the candles, and waited. When the morning sun struck the desk, the book was gone. No trace, no ash. Only a single page remained, placed exactly where she used to sit. Blank, except for one word. Remember. And some say, when a person dreams deeply enough, they hear her. Reading, from somewhere between silence and sky. Not aloud, not for show, only for those who truly rest. And when the dream ends, they too leave behind a page. The page was kept in the library. No frame, no glass, only placed gently on a wooden stand. Pilgrims came. Not many, but enough. They didn't come to read. They came to sit. And sometimes one would close their eyes. And when they opened them, a second page lay beside the first. No one saw it appear, but it was always a reflection of what that pilgrim had hidden, not in memory, but in soul. Some wrote about it. Most didn't. They were afraid the words might fade, that some truths belonged only to paper, not written by hand. A child once asked the librarian, "Why is the page always blank before I sit?" The librarian smiled, "Because it listens." And over time, shelves filled again, not with books, but with pages, not organized by topic, but by silence. And in the far corner beneath a candle that never flickered, a space was left for one more page, still unwritten, still listening, still waiting. He lived in silence, blind, bent. No one knew his name. They only called him the brother beneath the wall. Each night after prayers, he would walk slowly through the dark cloister until he reached the west wall. There he would kneel, raise both hands, and begin to trace letters onto stone. No ink, no parchment, just fingers moving across cold rock. The other monks pitied him. They believed his mind had gone, that he relived old memories, once a scribe, now a shadow. What they didn't know was that the wall remembered, and so did the sky. One evening, a novice looked up and gasped. Above the monastery, where constellations should be still, new lights had formed, curved, ordered, not random, as if someone were writing with stars. The novice ran to fetch the abbot. The old man scoffed until he too saw, not one word, but many, forming, changing each night, one line at a time. The monks began recording them. Each phrase appeared just once, then faded by morning, but their meaning lingered. One read, "Light does not see itself but gives sight." Another, "The hand remembers what the eyes forget." The blind scribe never spoke, never responded, just wrote, in silence, in rhythm, as if the heavens were his parchment, night after night, for years, and the stars obeyed. Villagers came, then pilgrims, then kings, all to read the sky. Yet no one disturbed him. They were afraid the writing might stop, and one night it did. He did not return to the wall. The next day the stars remained still. The next dimmed. By the third night the sky was blank, not clouded, not hidden, just silent. The monks searched. They found him beneath the fig tree, still seated, still smiling, gone, not in pain, not in fear, only finished. His hands folded, but his fingers stained with starlight. They buried him with honor, but the wall remained. And each evening a candle was lit beside it, waiting. Years passed. None dared approach, until one night a child wandered in, a daughter of a cook. Drawn by the flame, she touched the wall, and the stars flickered. Not words, but music. Not letters, but notes. She laughed, and drew again, and the monks wept, because they understood. The sky had not ended. It had changed script, from text to song, from silence to melody, and so it continued. Each generation one touched, not taught, only listening, only feeling. And above them, the sky remembers, still writing, still singing, still waiting. For hands that understand, stone can hold story, and stars can read. In time, scholars tried to explain. They mapped the lights, calculated patterns, wrote volumes, but none could say what the blind man knew, because he never looked. He only felt. They say the last word he traced was not a word. It was a breath. And that night, stars flickered in rhythm, as if inhaling. Some monks believe he wrote the sky into memory. Others say he read what was already there. It doesn't matter. What matters is this. Every century, on the same night he passed, a handprint appears on the wall. Small, faint, always new, always different. And each time the stars shift. Sometimes letters, sometimes images, sometimes only a single point of light, but it blinks in perfect rhythm with the heartbeat of whoever watches. They call it the living constellation. And those who see it say one thing: I was seen, not watched, not judged, seen, as if the stars were tracing them back, word by word, light by light, silence by silence, white, endless, but not empty. A room without walls. Light suspended, like breath before a word. And in the center, a figure. No name, no face, no memory. Only a pulse, a quiet rhythm within their chest. They stepped forward. The floor did not creak. There was no sound. Yet something stirred. From the ceiling, a single page fell. Not dropped. Drifted. Like ash remembering fire. They caught it. It glowed. A line. He was born without words. The listener blinked. Another page descended. She lived alone. Quiet. Dusting the sacred. And another. The brother beneath the wall wrote the sky. The listener trembled. They were not dreaming. They were remembering. Not their own life, but every life. Each story. Each silence. Each voice. A snowfall of stories began to fall pages upon pages, none colliding, each seeking its reader, each waiting. The listener walked slowly. Each step revealed more pages, some blank, some written, some whispering, not aloud, but inward. Stories that had never been told, some of pain, some of wonder, some too sacred for language. They passed a page that burned without heat, one that wept ink, another folded into itself endlessly. The listener touched them all, and felt seen, not as one person, but as a part of something ancient, still breathing, still becoming. Then silence. The pages stopped. None fell, none hovered, only the white, and a space ahead. Still, waiting. In the center of the room, a single pedestal. No book, no scroll, only a blank surface. Inviting. The listener approached, hands trembling, and the light bent, as if bowing, as if listening. Then a voice, not from the air, from within. What comes next is not written. The listener wept, not from sorrow, but awe, for they understood. This was not the end. This was the breath before the next verse. And the room responded. Light dimmed. Not in loss, in invitation. A pen formed made of silence. The surface before them shimmered, waiting. They reached forward and wrote, not in letters, not in language, but in being, in presence, in hope. And above them, stories stirred again. The brother beneath the wall, the child who sang stars, the scribe of the air, the woman of the blank page. Each voice now echoing through the chamber, not as echoes, but as chords. And the listener no longer alone, but joined by every silence that had ever spoken, every breath that had ever hoped. And in that room, where light hovered and story lived, the next line began. Still unwritten, still listening, still yours. Some say the room was a myth, that no such place exists. But others, they've seen it. In dreams, in moments between waking and sleep, in the pause before a prayer, or the hush before dawn. They've felt the stories stir, not behind them, but ahead, calling, not with noise, with purpose. And when they move through life, they walk differently. They listen deeper. They know every silence is a page, every kindness a verse, every wound a margin for grace. They don't rush to speak. They wait until the words come true. And when they do, they write. Not for fame, not for history, but because the light is still bowing, still breathing, still waiting. And the story, the true one, is not finished. It waits. For you, for your hands, for your silence, for your listening. So, if you hear nothing, pause, breathe. Perhaps the next line is yours to write.